Okay. What it do, Space Crew? I'm gonna show you how I make my big king cake pillow. Now, this is more of a process video rather than a tutorial, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. I also realized while editing I wasn't paying attention to my aspect ratio while filming, so it might change a few times. But with all that out the way, let's get to making a king cake. Starting off, you're gonna need your base color for your cake. I'm using Big Twist Value yarn in camel color. Get a few skein. JK, you just need one. Using your knitting machine, you'll crank out 200 rows. The machine I'm using is a 40 needle machine, but you could use a 46 or a 48 needle. The pillow will just come out a bit thicker is all. Now, a smart person would use waste yarn, but that's not me today, so we're just gonna dive right into the deep end. This is absolutely not going to be an issue later on. I'm awkwardly holding up my machine because it only has 3 legs. Poor tripod here lost his leg in an accident where he heroically took a fall for my tea so it wouldn't spill. His sacrifice will not be in vain. Continue cranking out those rows. If you're working on a table like how I am, you can just roll up your tube when it gets too long. Otherwise, use whatever contraption you whipped up. Let that tube run free. Cast her off and let's move on to the stuffing. It's at this point I will mention that it's best to make 2 of these tubes rather than what you're about to see me do here. Some good old polyfill is more than enough for this project, but I also use scraps from other projects as stuffing together with polyfill. Just make sure you cut them up into smaller bits or else it'll feel lumpy in the pillow. When you're done, you'll have one long boy ready for the next step. But first, a tea break. Today I've got matcha tea powder sweetened with a teaspoon of condensed milk. Time to sew! If you used waste yarn like a good person, you can just graft the tube together with a crochet hook. However, if you're me, crochet the loops at the end of each tube to finish it off, and sew it together with the mattress stitch. Once you've got your ends sewn together, then we can make the bundt cake look by wrapping the yarn around the tube a few times to make it taper in. I do the same thing when I make my small toy ones. This is basically how it'll end up looking. Try keeping your sections even, which will make this next step easier. As you can see, I did not. Just a little size comparison. This is how much bigger the pillow is than the toy version. This pillow is a commission meant to hold a newborn for photography, so it's going to have around a 16 to 18 inch diameter. Next step is to knit the icing. You'll need your Mardi Gras colors, of course, and I always add white to the color so it doesn't look too solid. Just a tip, if you make any mistakes along the way while making your tube, you can cover the mistakes up with the icing as long as they appear on the same side. So I'm gonna check the other side and pick my ugliest side to hide my sins. I've already knitted out one section of my icing so you can get an idea of where this is going. This is also why you should keep your sections even so you don't have to adjust the amount of stitches when you knit. When I sew this on, I'll attach one side over the dividing line to cover it, and the other side will be left open so I can overlap it onto the next color section. Okay, so how do I actually knit the icing? Guesswork. That's right. I don't actually have a set number of stitches I cast on when I do this, since it turns out different each time. Not to mention each section could end up being a different size. Though, if you keep the sections even, you can pretty much cast on the same amount each section. I'll give a range that has been pretty consistent with each pillow. 27 to 31 stitches. Always keep it odd. Here I've cast on 29 stitches for this section. If you're ever unsure where to start, using both white and the color, cast on 29 stitches, then knit 2 or 3 rows and measure that along your sections. You'll know if you need to go up to 31 or down to 27. I got a bit fancy with this one and added a border to the edge. All I did was knit row 1, purl row 2. But you don't need to do that. I actually found it better to knit all the rows as it looks flatter when I do the drip details. But you do you. Regardless of how many I cast on, I will always knit 26 rows, then decrease 1 on both sides until I'm left with about 6 or 7 stitches, then cast off. Do this 5 more times with your other colors. 2 greens, 2 yellows, 2 purples total. Starting off my healthy breakfast with weird shaped donuts. I don't know what happened to that one, but I'm still gonna eat it. That's my breakfast. It's 1:30. Now it's starting to come together. Like I mentioned before, I will sew one side over the dividing line and overlap the other side over the next color. Make sure to lay out your color so that the same color is across from it. Here's a good order to follow. Another tip, I found it easier to sew one side of the icing first, then sew each section counterclockwise. After that absolutely healthy don't at me breakfast, I'll sew on the icing with a whip stitch. Make sure to take your needle under the dividing line, through your icing, and back over so it attaches correctly. I'll just use my exercise machine to make a giant pastry, as you should. It will look like this once it's done. On the greens, you can see I already made the drips, and that's the next step. I've got about 6 drips going across here, but you can do however many you like. This part is done with crochet, but you can also embroider the drips on. That's what I do for my toy-sized ones. I'll add a link in the description to a tutorial on how to crochet drips, for those of you who don't know how. After I've made all the drips on the colors, on both the inside and out, I'll sew them down to the cake. Now I'm going to make the white icing part that goes on top of the king cake. But I'm gonna make it thicker since this is a bigger one. And I was gonna try using this, but it's not really knitting my worsted 4 yarn. It just keeps dropping the stitches. And you would think that this one, this is a tulip knitter, do the same, and it says to use smaller yarn, but I seem to have no issue with 4 yarn on this either, so I'm going to just use this. got my cord all knitted up. Before I go and use this, let's shave. This is a fabric shaver, like for when you get pilling on your clothes. So I have one for my knit stuff because after working on long projects like this, they get fluffy, they get whatnot. So I try and keep them neat. This one has different settings. I usually go around the medium or the taller one. That's not what it is. What is it? It's the difference is how close it is to the fabric. So I don't want it to get too close so it doesn't cut the whole entire fabric. I don't want it to like cut up the yarn. I just want it to shave the top off. Okay, so we're gonna unravel this because it curls up on itself, so we can sew it to make the icing. As for the cord, you're gonna wanna make this cord long, like really long. Long like some rope long. Long like a python someone let loose in Florida long. Long like a wacky waving, arm flailing, inflatable tube man long. Long like traffic on the GWB during rush hour long. Long like a 10-mile kayaking trip down the Delaware. Okay, you get it. Okay, so now I'm gonna get these and pin them in place to the cake so I know where I have this laid out, and then I can have it sewed evenly because I've been measuring what I'm supposed to be doing or whatever. So let's do that. Oh, when's the last time I drank water? When sewing this cord onto your cake, you can either use a basic running stitch or the much faster and much easier whip stitch. The running stitch takes longer, but it also hides the stitches. Alright, I've sewn on the icing or frosting, whatever it's called. The last thing to do is embroider on the details, which usually would be beads, but since this is going to be for a baby, I'm using no glue or beads. I'm making French knots on this cake, link in the description. I use two colors that aren't the color of the section. So on this purple section, I'll use green and yellow, on the green section, I'll use yellow and purple, and so on. Okay, so now it's done, and I did end up with a different color because I ran out of the other color, but that's why I wanted it to be consistent, at least between the two greens. So I didn't continue on this way when I was embroidering it. But here we are. This is an 18 inch. It was originally supposed to be a 16 inch, but it's now an 18 inch king cake pillow. It's got some weight to it. And we're done here. Now I'm gonna go because I've gotta mail more orders, plus this one. An update since I recorded this a while back. The baby who this was for was born, and you can see how the pillow looks with the baby on the Etsy listing. Again, if you have any questions or you want me to explain something I skimmed over, leave me a comment below. That's all. Peace!